What did I tell you guys? All 4 of these 2020 lists before March. Look at me hitting the ground running. Hey guys, it's CDTVProductions here, and welcome to the 4th and final end of year list. The 10 worst rap albums of 2020. And this one, I honestly had the most fun with it. There's gonna be some entries you would expect here, there's gonna be some that maybe you won't, and in the end, it's just gonna be a fun ride where you bully me for disliking the music that you love. Before we start, make sure to drop a fat like even though you've only seen a tiny percentage of the video, and let's get into it. CDTV, that's me, worst albums of 2020. Let's begin.
There must be something they put in the water. I quit my job at MacDonald's and built an empire, and now I'm a gold mine.
Also, I hope you guys like what I'm doing with the microphone. I don't want to hold it anymore. This album was dead on arrival. Some of you guys might be surprised this is on here. Some of you might not agree with it, but ADHD was so disappointing after such a long build up to it that it has to be included on here. Now, you need to understand, this is not coming from the perspective of someone who hates and has always hated Joyner Lucas. I used to be a pretty big fan of him, which is why it was such a deflating feeling for this to drop a year and a half after it was announced, with 4 of the tracks being skits and 9 of them being released before the album had actually dropped. 6 new songs. We got 6 new songs on an 18-track album. What's that, like 33%? An EP? And the new songs, with the exception of I Lied and Revenge, which do slap, are pretty weak. I mean, you might have noticed all 3 of my personal worst tracks from this album. Those are 3 of the 6 new ones.
Can't touch me when I'm in my zone. Came too far, that's on my soul. When you gonna give me the respect I'm owed? Every damn thing, new day, new fight. Always running in and out my life. Hell no, I just put the cash bag on the mattress. I don't need it that bad, you can have it.
And when it comes to the previously released songs, I've either played them to death already, they didn't have longevity for me, or they just weren't as good as most songs from Joyner's previous projects. The release was super messy, and on top of that, the music just felt like it didn't know what it wanted to be. With ADHD, it feels like Joyner wanted to make mainstream songs and make songs that sound like his old sound at the same time. And trying to appeal to those 2 audiences at once just creates a messy, unfocused sound that's hard to invest in. All this has resulted in it being an album that I barely even think about revisiting. I did consider myself a fan of Joyner before ADHD, but after this album, I feel much less inclined to keep up with what he's doing.
She take the whole enchilada. All I got for is horchata. Put my car in a sata.
So, after he managed to find the release date, Blueface unfortunately still couldn't find the good music. The craziest thing is, I thought this album was what I wanted. But I honestly just want a full, on-beat project from him. Maybe that would kill his buzz, maybe other people don't want to hear that, but I personally would love it. I think he would really kill something like that. And hey, on some tracks, it worked, like on First Class. At least until Gunna came through to do his signature move of removing all the energy from a song. But on most songs, it just robbed Blueface of one of the main things that made him stand out from the crowd. Now his music just sounds shitty and isn't different to anything else. I don't quite know how he does it, but somehow it sounds like there's even less care put into making the songs when he's rapping on beat. Everything about this album sounds either cheap, rushed, or just plain bad. The production, exactly the type of bootleg bargain bin production you would expect to hear from Blueface's music. The features, outside of the Polo G feature on Murder Rate and NLE Choppa on Holy Moly, they're, well...
Hey, bitch on the shit, caca.
Well, they're...
Blueface in the cut so your friend could come too. Yeah,
they're just... not good. And don't even get me started on the worst of the worst tracks here, like the abomination that is Carne Asada, his singing on Period.
Why do you take Instagram serious?
His singing on In the Zone.
Catch a nigga slipping and I'm sliding like I'm at the park.
Or the weak shout rapping on Street Shit. That's right, Blueface does a shout rapping song on here.
You ain't with this street shit, stay your bitch ass on the curb.
They even made the album cover worse before it dropped. What happened to the version with all the features on it? This one just looks sad and empty. Kind of like how I feel after listening to 10 albums I can't stand for a single video. The only reason I don't consider this album as bad as the next day I'm gonna talk about is because at least there is some entertainment value here. Yes, the music is garbage, but it's funny garbage, and some of Blueface's punchlines are still witty to an extent, so there are some areas in which this album kind of redeems itself from being further down on this list.
Bitch, I'm rich. I pay your mess for the heat. You won't hear this bitch, here come a blick. Get him out here. Glock 19 on my hip with a dick.
It's not great when you listen to an album that's merely 12 tracks long and you end up thinking to yourself, that really would have been better if they cut the track list in half. This might just be one of the most copy-paste albums I listened to in 2020. If you've heard the first couple songs, you've heard everything this album has to offer. Stunna's label boss, DaBaby, always gets shit for not changing his flow often, but Stunna for Vegas is easily worse when it comes to that. Especially because Stunna's signature flow, which is all you hear on this album, doesn't even sound good like DaBaby's does. It sounds clumsy and messy. So many of his lines are recorded separately and then edited together in a way that they all fall over each other and jumble together with his ad-libs.
You ain't gangster cause you dropped out of school. I graduated and still break the rules. And I'm still that nigga, I'm richer than all my turn to a plate if I make them fool.
Punching in to record your lines individually with as much energy as possible is fine, but not if it comes together sounding like this. Stunna's music is just completely linear on Rich Youngin in every aspect, and probably on his other projects too, but I really don't want to check them out after hearing this. The delivery, the production, the flows, there's no changes or bumps in that line for any of these things, with all of them staying the same for 12 songs in a row. It just gets completely mind-numbing. To put it very bluntly, to me, this just sounds like the same formula as DaBaby's music, but if you remove the charisma, the personality, and anything that makes it appealing.
And how could y'all write that, bruh? You can blame the rappers that you blow up.
Now, this is gonna sound like a bit of a waste of a spot, but I do not want to talk about this album in this video. But there is a reason for that, and it's not because I have nothing to say about it. It's actually kind of the opposite. For those of you who watch my channel regularly, you'll know that I'm working on a track-by-track review of this album, just like I did for Tom's Ghost Stories project. I don't want to spoil all my thoughts here, but all you need to know about it is that this is the worst Tom MacDonald project that has dropped yet, and I do have a lot to say about it. I just want to save it for the main video. Just know that it features Tom at his cringiest, lamest, and whitest, and that is why it occupies a spot on this year's list.
But my mama a glizzy and showed her how to use it. I told you I'm busy, so counting some cash I'm probably doing.
Now, I don't know what happened here, but it seems like when Comethazine doesn't have Bosky in his album name, all the fun vanishes along with the series title. Speaking of the title, I swear this album was announced with the name Pandemic before COVID-19 was a pandemic. So basically, I think this project is to blame. The appeal for me with Comethazine's music is that it's ignorant, it's aggressive, it has an energetic I don't give a fuck attitude. This album also has an I don't give a fuck attitude, but in the complete wrong way. Want to get an idea of what I mean? Listen to these tracks from Bosky 3.5 side by side with tracks from Pandemic.
Shit that I spit is legit, not no bullshit. Roll up a 3 gram spliff and pull it. He on the gram talking tough, but he full of it. Psych, bitch, I'ma stay rich. Fuck on that bit, make her dip like a chip. Shoot the stick, he pop like a zip. Bought a new exotic pit bull pocket. My lost dog got replaced. Bought some new exotic soda poppin'. I just love how it tastes. Look for his ass till we find him. Spotted him running, just shot from behind him. Relays the beam at his eyes, it'll blind him. I'm not a crip, I'm a permanent blood clot. I'm always lit, my eyes permanent bloodshot. Glue the Glock to my hip, it's a permanent glick.
The difference is astounding. Comethazine just embodies apathy on this album. He sounds like he was in the studio looking like the dad from Coraline. The lyrics and rhymes are so uninspired too. He spends the hook of undefeated just describing what the word undefeated means in different ways. And Glide is just the same 8 bars repeated twice. Div, who has produced some of Comethazine's best tracks throughout his discography, is only found on 4 tracks here. The rest is produced by Childboy, and my god, did he supply Comethazine with beats that were completely lacking any strong presence. Mama's Glizzy and Pitbull being great examples of the limp beats.
I bought a private jet and almost crashed it when I flew it. But my mama a glizzy and showed her how to use it. Bunch of the bullshit, I can't see y'all. I certainly wouldn't wanna be y'all. Bought a new Pitbull and stand about knee tall.
And for some reason, this is the one that he chose to be his first studio album. This 20-minute snorefest. And I came this far without mentioning the bar on Gallardo where he says, I put my dick in her face, she say, now that's too much. Put it in anyway, this is how you shut hoes up. Pandemic deserves a spot on this list just for that line, to be honest. If you like Comethazine, avoid Pandemic like the plague, and just listen to Bosky 4, which dropped after this. That album is better for his sound than the lame product that is Pandemic.
Living the life that we chose. Yeah, I got up with a slut. She's so Chanel.
Have you listened to the Slime Season trilogy? If so, you don't need this album. Seriously, people said that Lil Baby and Gunna sounded like Young Thug when they first came out, but Lil Keed actually does, just nowhere near as good. On Not Much Fun by Lil Keed, we get to hear him doing Young Thug's Harambe / Cartier Gucci scarf inflection.
Hey, Alabama. Humps on these pockets like a camel. My partner play with a Pirates ball like he Temple.
And a copy of his higher pitched inflections too. The track Kiss 'Em Peace, which features Young Thug. Genuinely hard to tell who's rapping at some points.
It might not matter to you, but it matter to me. Put a Panamera top, let's wait on the seats. Y'all call her friends, bitch, she kiss my wee wee wee.
Even the lyrics aren't unique to Keed, with him partaking in the weird obsession in the YSL clique of girls drinking their spit.
I used to like her, but now that I love her, the way she was drinking my spit. She told me she was thirsty, started drinking my spit. Yeah, she drank my spit, cause you know young nigga get rich.
Not only do they just bite flows from Young Thug, they bite his fetishes too. There are quite a few tracks with great production here, and hell, Keed even puts catchy hooks on a couple of them. But I can't bear to sit through an album that is so easily replaceable by a much better product. Keed lacks the weirdness of Thug, the strange but compelling personality he has to him, the originality. So he's pretty much just a very annoying, unoriginal voice. That's your sound, and you're gonna make me sit through 19 tracks of it? And then drop a deluxe to make it 37 tracks? The deluxe album trend is the real pandemic, holy shit. Yes, this whole segment has essentially been a comparison, but that is legitimately my main takeaway from Trapped on Cleveland 3 and Keed's music as a whole. And when that's the main thing that sticks with me from your project, then it's an album that deserves a spot on this list.
Let that talk down. All them niggas saying let that talk down.
The more time goes on, the more I feel like I overhated Lil Boat 2 by Lil Yachty. That made it to my worst albums of 2018 list, and I don't love it now, but it doesn't seem that bad to me anymore. Part of the reason it doesn't seem as bad to me now is probably because Lil Boat 3 made me realize what bad Yachty music truly sounds like. I mean, Teenage Emotions already did that, but this album did too, so shh. Not to say that all of this absolutely sucks. The 3-track run of Split/Whole Time, TD, and Pardon Me was actually pretty great. But outside of that and the track Till the Morning, man, Yachty went on a consistent miss streak. The more melodic tracks on here are far from the fun sound of Lil Boat 1, with Yachty switching between either sounding deathly bored or completely ridiculous on almost all of them.
And I'm with my dogs like a chew bone. Said I fuck her for 10 minutes, then I get gone. $250,000 bags packed, Glock 9 left hip, no nigga can't go.
Blocking out Teenage Emotions from my memory, something that would be healthy for all of us to do, this is probably some of the worst singing that I have ever heard from Yachty. It's also safe to say that this is the most inconsistent album in the Lil Boat series so far. The first one had a very definable sound, as did the second one, going for a darker, harder sound than the first. But this one sort of blends those two in a way, but worse, that doesn't really give Lil Boat 3 its own distinguishable sound. The only notable difference is that most of the tracks here are worse than 80% of the tracks from 1 and 2. The first two feel like projects with an actual aesthetic. This one just feels like a compilation of Yachty songs. It's nowhere near as well put together and is certainly my least favourite album in the series, by quite a lot.
Bitch, she told me it's hurting. 50 racks in this bag made off one blade. Skelly AP on my wrist, this ain't no date.
Here's a fun thing for you guys to know. I've done 3 of these worst albums of the year lists now, and Smokepurpp has appeared on 3 of them. He is the king of consistency when it comes to dropping bad music. And this one, somehow it's his worst. Florida Jet is one long song that's marketed and packaged as an album. And to be honest, this album should have been decent. With the look of the cover and the fact that Ronnie J produced 10 out of 17 tracks, you would expect Smokepurpp to be going back to his at least slightly more entertaining, harder hitting SoundCloud style. But the crazy thing is, the Ronnie J produced beats here are the shittiest ones. Almost all of them suck, being comprised mainly of a single, simple looped sound with an 808 heavy drum pattern thrown over that loop, and boom, there's your instrumental for the entire fucking song.
BB's dripping off my shirt like a typhoon. Boom, bitch. Label meeting, I got codeine in the room. Codeine. Game in the law, had the bitch buy a new song. Gotta say shit to a bitch, she gon' choose.
Sure, it does call back more to Purpp's SoundCloud days with the structure and the dark sound of the music, but in a really incredibly boring way to listen to. If you want to hear Smokepurpp remind you again about how much he wants his dick sucked while he wears his VVS diamonds and shoots people over insanely one-note production, then Florida Jet is the album for you, and please immediately seek therapy. It is no surprise that all the best tracks on here have features. Smokepurpp is just genuinely one of the dullest rappers to listen to, and Florida Jet is a spectacular example of that. The fact that I revisit more tracks on Dead Star 2, which I really disliked as well, than I do on this album, that tells me all I need to know. Whatever Purpp drops next, I can only hope it doesn't go further downhill from here.
Put my lean in the sink for that pussy. I'ma rob a bank for that pussy. I'm a dog, I can.
And funnily enough, we're following up Smokepurpp with another rapper that has appeared on all 3 of my worst albums lists, Rich the Mid. except that nickname is misleading because the majority of his music falls significantly under mid. Each year, Rich has appeared at a worse spot than the last, with his latest, Boss Man, being the worst thing that I have ever heard from him. At this point, I am so deeply sick of hearing Rich the Kid rapping the exact same way on every single track that any album he drops in the future will be a worst albums of the year contender. That's not to say he doesn't switch up his rapping style at all on this album, because on a couple tracks he does try to. But the results are disastrous.
I had to get my hands on you. I might spend these bands on you.
Who is out here listening to Rich the Kid albums? I just don't see the appeal of hearing the same basic rap song made by one of the most boring rappers to ever grace a microphone over and over again, with the size of his track lists increasing every single year. Rich is a rapper that's only really tolerable for about one song. Getting through 19 of them is pure agony. The only real saving grace when it comes to rapping for Rich the Kid albums are usually the features, but A, there's not enough of them on here, 11 of the tracks are solo, and B, none of them on Boss Man are on the level of Offset on Lost It, Trippy on Early Morning Trappin', Big Sean on 2 Cups, or Takeoff and Lil Pump on Rockets. I know what you're thinking, but trust me, that is one of Pump's smoothest verses. The best thing about this album is that the title reminds me of Chet Hanks saying Boss Man Biden in a Jamaican accent.
Donald no one rap but big boss man Biden. Fuck them ras pussy clat boy. Go suck una mother.
That clip is so ridiculous that it makes me happy. Something that this album massively fails to do. Aside from Far From You and That's Tough, you can throw the rest of the album away.
Fingers crossed that I am your type. What am I saying, bitch? My bread is right. I could treat you right. I could change it.
All the signs that this was coming were there. So this was bad. This was easily just one of the worst albums I've heard this year. Probably the worst. And once I'm finished with this one, I'm gonna completely forget about this album until it comes time to make my 10 worst albums of the year list. Is it the obvious choice? It definitely is. But it's the obvious choice for number 1 on a worst albums of the year list because everyone knows it's shit. 6ix9ine probably even knows this is shit. He had months in prison to write songs and plan out how his music was gonna sound in his head, and this was the end result? I've heard Jake Paul music of a higher caliber than TattleTales. The amount we hear 6ix9ine singing on here should genuinely be illegal under some sort of act that prevents torture via audio. At least some of the earlier 6ix9ine songs where he was shouting were hard, but what am I supposed to feel when listening to tracks like Tutu, Nini, or Leia, other than pure repulsion?
Cause you can't pop like this. Everybody want my swag, everybody want my drip. I like her body like the way she move. She know my body like the way I move. She wanna have sex with me for real. She wanna have sex with me for real.
I genuinely believe his ego has become so inflated that he thinks he can drop more ass than a strip club and people will still care about him. 6ix9ine is unfortunately threatening to drop a new song soon that he teased over social media, but the fact that he did disappear for so long after this album completely flopped says a lot. Nobody wants to hear this man rapping anymore, and 6ix9ine needs to accept that he has to try harder than he does on this garbage can of an album if he wants to hold on to that tiny bit of relevancy that he has left. The fact that this album bastardizes the legendary song Locked Up by Akon, somehow with Akon's own stamp of approval, just gains it even more points in the This Album Sucks department.
Fighting with my lawyers for a better offer. Just wanna see my daughter. Cause I'm locked up.
It's actually shocking how atrocious this album manages to be. Outside of Nicki and Akon, who, again, why the fuck is he on here? Twice? Aside from them, there's no other big name features. Therefore, there is no reason to listen to TattleTales. Boring, vapid, lazy writing, awful singing, production that isn't all that gripping. I've said it before and I'll say it again, this sounds like parody music. I don't think I need to justify this any further. I don't know who is watching this video that doesn't agree with me right now. This is not even an opinion. TattleTales is the worst rap album. TattleTales is the worst album of 2020. Thank you for watching.
Wait, I got them jealous again, then they feelings again. Wait, cry baby, they crying again, cause they can't do what I can. Wait.